I took the Harlow case in October of 2008. Back then, nobody wanted it. Not because it was difficult, not because it was violent, because everybody who touched it ended up wanting out. At the time, I thought that was cop superstition. Every department has stories like that. Cases people whisper about in break rooms to scare rookies. A woman claims her house is haunted. Patrol officers get called out repeatedly. Nothing is ever there. Eventually, she winds up dead. Open and shut. At least, that's what I believed before I walked into that house. Before I saw the photographs. Before I heard the tapes. Before I learned what fear can actually do to a human body. My name is Detective Mercer. I've worked homicide for 26 years, and there are things I've seen that still wake me up at night. But nothing compares to Evelyn Harlow. Even now, I wish I'd never taken that case. It started with nuisance calls. Evelyn Harlow lived alone in a narrow 2-story home just outside Blackwater County. 43 years old, divorced, no children, worked nights doing medical billing from home. Quiet woman, no criminal history, no documented mental illness. The first 911 call came on August 14th. The dispatcher's note said, "Female caller claims someone is inside walls." Patrol searched the house. Nothing. No forced entry, no footprints, no signs of trespassing. The second call came 3 days later. This time she claimed a man had been standing outside her bedroom window for hours without moving. Again, officers responded. Again, nothing. By the 5th call, they stopped taking her seriously. One patrolman wrote in his report, "Caller appears paranoid and sleep deprived. Suggested psychiatric evaluation." That should have been the end of it. Except the calls kept escalating. She said she heard breathing under the floorboards. Said mirrors in the house reflected movement that wasn't behind her. Said something followed her from room to room, but vanished whenever she turned around. Then came the part that bothered me. She claimed it wasn't confined to the house anymore. According to dispatch recordings, Evelyn started seeing it everywhere. At the grocery store, in the parking lot, standing between aisles, watching from across intersections. Always the same description: big, ugly, slimy, face too dark to make out, and in her words, a face from hell. One dispatcher later testified that Evelyn sounded completely lucid, calm, and even. She wasn't screaming, and she wasn't hysterical, just plainly terrified. She kept repeating the same sentence: "It knows nobody believes me." Then she died, October 3rd of 2008. Patrol responded to a welfare check after Evelyn missed work and stopped answering calls. Officer Ortega arrived first. He retired 6 months later, wouldn't say why. The body was found upstairs in the bedroom. No signs of assault, injuries, drugs, or other toxins. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as cardiac arrest induced by extreme psychological stress. Scared to death, in other words. Most people hear that phrase and think it's just an expression. Well, it isn't. Your body can flood itself with enough adrenaline to stop your heart. Rare, but possible. Especially if someone experiences catastrophic terror. The strange part wasn't how she died. It was where they found her. Evelyn was sitting upright in bed with her back pressed hard against the headboard. Her fingernails had torn bloody grooves into the wood behind her. And her face. I've spent my entire career looking at dead people. Gunshots, stabbings, car wrecks, you name it. But I have never seen fear frozen into a human face like that. Her eyes were stretched so wide they'd burst blood vessels. Her jaw had locked open. Every muscle in her body looked rigid, like she died in the middle of screaming. But the room was untouched. No struggle, no signs of an intruder, nothing except one detail officers couldn't explain. Every photograph hanging in the bedroom had been turned upside down, even the ones nailed to walls. That's when the case landed on my desk. I remember laughing the first time I read the file. A ghost killed her? Come on. I figured it was a stalker. It had to be. Somebody terrorized a mentally fragile woman until her heart gave out. Simple. Then, I went to the house myself, and things stopped feeling so simple. The Harlow home sat at the end of a dead road surrounded by dying trees. The place looked abandoned even before we entered. Windows blacked out, paint peeling. No sounds except the wind whistling through the broken windows. I brought Officer Collins with me for the walkthrough. He was 24 years old, big guy, former Marine. He joked the entire drive there. He stopped joking once we stepped inside. The house didn't smell right. It wasn't rot, wasn't mildew. It was a cold smell. That's the only way I can describe it. Like opening a freezer, and it stayed cold no matter what room we entered. We searched the place top to bottom, but found nothing unusual, at least not at first, until we reached the upstairs hallway. That's where Collins noticed the photographs. Every frame along the wall had been turned around, facing inward, like someone didn't want the pictures looking out. I remember saying, "Probably some nervous habit." Collins didn't answer. He was staring toward the end of the hallway. I asked him what was wrong. He said he thought he saw someone had moved in the bedroom doorway. We checked immediately, but of course there was nobody there. But that's when we found Evelyn's tapes, cassette recordings stacked beside her bed, 37 of them to be exact, all labeled by date. I made the mistake of listening to them alone later that night. The first tape sounded harmless. Evelyn documenting noises, nothing much, creaking floors, random knocking sounds. She spoke softly then, rationally, like she was trying to prove to herself that she wasn't crazy. It wasn't long before the recordings changed. By tape 14, she whispered, "It stands in corners now." There was a long silence after that. Then, faintly, underneath her breathing, another sound. Breathing that wasn't hers. I replayed it 15 times. It could have been interference, could have just been static. That's what I told myself, trying to convince myself. Tape 19 was worse. Evelyn was crying. Not loudly, a quiet type of crying. The kind people do when they're exhausted beyond panic. She said, "It follows me outside now. I saw it in my car mirror tonight. When I turned around, it was sitting in the back seat." Then came a sound I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. A laugh. Low. Wet. Right beside the recorder. Evelyn gasped, and the tape abruptly ended. I nearly convinced myself someone was pranking her. That was until I heard tape 26. That one destroyed me. The recording began with silence. Then Evelyn whispered, "It told me something." Another silence. Then she said, "It said it only looks like one thing to me." I remember feeling a knot form in my stomach at that moment, because right after she said that, a man's voice answered, clear as day.
"No one else sees me the same way."
The voice wasn't loud. It was calm, almost gentle. I sent the tapes to audio analysis. They found zero evidence of editing, no splicing, nothing of the sort. After that, I became obsessed with the case. I interviewed neighbors, co-workers, family. Everyone described Evelyn the same way, normal and grounded, not religious, but also not superstitious. But one interview stuck with me. An elderly woman living nearby told me Evelyn had changed after visiting Blackwater Asylum 3 months before her death. The asylum had been abandoned since the 70s. According to the neighbor, Evelyn went there with local urban explorers filming videos for the internet. Afterward, she became withdrawn. Claimed something came home with her. I tracked down the explorers. 2 refused interviews. The third reluctantly agreed. His name was Trevor, 20 years old. When I mentioned Evelyn, all the color drained from his face. He told me they'd entered the asylum through a collapsed maintenance tunnel. Inside, they found old patient rooms untouched for decades. And deep underground, they discovered a sealed observation chamber. That's where Evelyn saw it. Trevor wouldn't describe exactly what happened. He just kept saying, "She looked at something she shouldn't have." Then he told me something worse. Evelyn wasn't the only one who saw it. Another explorer named Dana claimed a tall figure followed her home too. Dana committed suicide 2 weeks later. At that point, I should have walked away. But cops don't like mysteries. We need explanations. So, reluctantly, I went to Blackwater Asylum myself. Biggest mistake of my life. The place sat rotting in the woods about 30 miles outside of town, half collapsed, graffiti everywhere. I brought Collins again. He didn't want to go. Neither did I. But we went anyway. The observation chamber took hours to find. It was beneath the building behind rusted steel doors. Inside, the room was circular, concrete walls, one chair bolted to the floor, and hundreds of scratch marks. Not random scratches. Words. Most were too faded to read, except one repeated over and over. "Do not look at it when it speaks." Collins found old records nearby. Apparently, the asylum once housed patients suffering from shared hallucinations, mass psychosis cases. Doctors believed fear itself could spread between people like a disease. One psychiatrist wrote that several patients described a smiling figure without a stable appearance. That line made my blood run cold. Then we heard movement. Footsteps, right above us, slow, dragging. We searched the halls. Nobody there, of course. But on our way back downstairs, Collins suddenly froze. He was staring into a dark doorway. I asked him what he saw. He wouldn't answer. But later he whispered, "It followed us here." I grabbed his shoulder. He jerked away so violently he nearly fell. And for 1 second, one impossibly long second, I thought I saw someone standing behind him. Massive, slimy, smiling. Then the hallway was empty. We left immediately. Collins put in for a transfer 3 days later. Said he'd never enter that building again. I didn't blame him, because after that night, I started noticing things too. Reflections lingering half a second too long. Shapes standing in rooms after lights switched off. Once, while driving home, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw someone sitting in the back seat. I crashed into a guardrail trying to turn around. Nobody was there. That's when I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. My wife begged me to drop the case, but I couldn't, because deep down, I knew Evelyn had been telling the truth. Something terrorized her. Whether it was supernatural or psychological, it really didn't matter anymore. The fear was real, and it spread. The final tape was recovered months later from inside the bedroom wall during renovations. Tape 37, the last recording Evelyn ever made. I listened to it once. Only once. She sounded exhausted, defeated. She said, "It's here all the time now." Then, silence. Then, slow footsteps creaking across her bedroom floor. Evelyn began crying. You can have the house," she whispered. "Please, just leave me alone." The footsteps stopped, and then came that voice again, closer than ever, soft and patient.
"You looked at me."
A long pause followed. Then Evelyn asked the question that still haunts me. "What are you?" The answer came immediately.
"I'm what people become when they're finally alone."
Then screaming. Not sudden, not startled, sustained animalistic terror. The kind that tears the throat raw. The tape cut off after 43 seconds. I retired 2 years later. Officially, the Harlow case remains unresolved. Unofficially, I think Blackwater Asylum discovered something capable of infecting the mind itself. Maybe fear, maybe something even worse. Maybe some things don't need claws or weapons to kill you. Maybe all they need is to be seen. You want to know the worst part? This is the piece I never included in my report. The thing I've never told anyone. Not even my wife. A week after hearing the final tape, I came home late one night and found every photograph in my house turned upside down. Every single one. My wife swore she hadn't touched them. I searched the entire house with my gun drawn and found absolutely nothing. But when I reached the hallway mirror, I saw someone standing behind me. Massive, slimy, a face from hell. And when I spun around, there was nobody there, except for one thing: wet footprints leading toward my bedroom. Detective Stevenson retired 3 years ago. At least, that's what the paper said. Truth is, I never really left the job. Not mentally. You don't spend 32 years staring at crime scenes, listening to grieving parents, and digging through the worst parts of humanity without carrying pieces of it home with you. Most cases fade eventually. This one didn't. Because no matter how many times I tried to explain it away, no matter how many reports I reread, no matter how many sleepless nights I spent with a bottle in my hand, convincing myself there had to be a rational answer, I still don't know what took those kids. And I still see that message, scratched into the drywall, deep enough to hit the studs beneath. He's always watching. The Redstone disappearances became the biggest cold case in Texas history for about 6 months before the media lost interest and moved on to fresher tragedies. 9 teenagers all vanished on Halloween night in 2004. There were no bodies to be found, no blood, and no suspects identified. Nothing. 9 kids simply ceased to exist. I was the lead detective, unlucky enough to inherit the investigation. It started at 2:13 a.m. I remember because my wife had just fallen asleep on the couch while waiting for me to come home. I was halfway through cold coffee and paperwork when dispatch called. Multiple missing persons, teenagers, possible runaway situation. At first, nobody panicked. Halloween always brought stupid behavior. Kids sneaking out, drinking in abandoned fields, wandering into places they shouldn't. The group had planned to meet near Redstone, an old patch of forest outside town locals avoided after dark. There were stories about the place going back decades. Missing hikers, strange lights between trees, hunters hearing voices. Small town nonsense. At least that's what I thought. The first sign something was wrong came from the parents. All 9 families reported the exact same thing. Their children's bedrooms had been vandalized. I arrived at the first house around 3 a.m. A woman named Diane met me at the door wearing slippers and mascara running down her face. "My son isn't answering his phone," she kept repeating. "Something's wrong." I remember walking upstairs expecting graffiti or maybe some cruel prank from friends. Instead, I found the message. He's always watching. The words were carved directly into the wall above the bed. Not written. Carved. The grooves were jagged and uneven, like someone used a knife with enormous pressure. Bits of drywall dust still sat on the carpet below. "What did this?" I asked. Diane shook her head violently. "It wasn't there earlier." I crouched near the wall. The cuts looked fresh. Very fresh. "What time did your son leave?" "Around 8. "And nobody entered afterward?" "No." I believed her. Parents lie all the time during investigations, but fear has a certain smell to it, a certain look. She wasn't lying. Then dispatch radioed in. Another house, same message, then another and another. By sunrise, all 9 homes had identical carvings in their children's rooms, same wording, same placement above the bed, same fresh cuts, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no signs of forced entry. I remember standing in one of those bedrooms as dawn came through the curtains, staring at those words while something unfamiliar crept into my stomach. It wasn't fear, at least not yet, but it was dread. The search began immediately. We combed Hollow Creek with dogs, helicopters, volunteers, anything we had. The woods stretched for miles, thick with dead oak trees and uneven ravines. Locals used to say the forest swallowed sound. Even during daylight, the place didn't feel right. Too quiet. The dogs picked up the teenagers' scent near an abandoned church road leading into the woods. Then the trail stopped abruptly. Didn't fade, they completely stopped. Like the kids had vanished into thin air. No footprints beyond a certain point. No tire tracks, and no evidence of struggle. Just 9 sets of tracks ending near an old stone drainage tunnel half buried beneath roots. One of the officers joked, maybe the kids crawled inside. Nobody laughed. The tunnel entrance was narrow, maybe 4 feet high, choked with mud and vines. I went in first with Deputy Smith behind me. The air smelled rotten. It wasn't decay exactly, but more a wet earth mixed with something metallic smell. The tunnel stretched farther than it should have. Our flashlights barely touched the darkness ahead. Then Smith grabbed my shoulder. "Did you hear that?" At first I didn't, but then I did. Breathing that didn't belong to us. Slow, heavy, labored, echoing somewhere deeper inside. We called out. No response came. Then the breathing stopped. Then came the scraping. A sharp, dragging sound against stone. Closer. Smith whispered, Let's go." I agreed immediately. We moved backward carefully, lights fixed ahead, and for 1 second, 1 single second, my flashlight caught someone standing at the far end of the tunnel. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. I could only see the outline, but it couldn't have been human. Its eyes reflected white in the beam. Then the flashlight flickered. When it came back on, the figure was gone. We got out fast after that. I told myself exhaustion caused it. Tunnel shadows and stress. Terrible mixture. But Smith refused to speak for the rest of the day. 3 days later, he resigned. Wouldn't tell anyone why. The deeper we dug into the case, the stranger things became. The teenagers had all attended the same Halloween party before disappearing. Witnesses said the group planned to explore Redstone around midnight after one of the boys, Caleb, claimed he found something cool in the woods days earlier. We searched Caleb's house thoroughly. His parents were wrecks. His mother could barely stand. While officers processed his bedroom, I noticed something odd near his closet. Mud. Fresh mud tracked across the carpet. The only problem was, Caleb had disappeared 2 nights earlier. So I followed the prints. They stopped beneath his bedroom window. The lock was still engaged from the inside. I opened the closet, and inside, carved into the back wall, were more words. Different this time. Don't let him see you. I remember feeling genuinely cold reading that. The kind of cold that starts under your skin. We tore the house apart afterward and found nothing else. But that night, I received my first phone call. No caller ID. I answered it half asleep. At first there was only static, then breathing. Low, wet, and labored. I demanded identification, but no answer. Suddenly, a voice whispered,
"He saw it."
The line went dead. I traced the call. but it originated from nowhere. That's what the tech department told me anyway. It didn't ping any towers, didn't register any location. That's not possible, but that's all we had. After that, things escalated faster. Parents began reporting movement outside their homes at night. One father fired a shotgun at someone standing near the tree line behind his property. Police searched the area. There were no footprints. Another mother claimed she woke to someone staring through her son's bedroom window, 30 feet off the ground. I thought grief was breaking them. Then I saw it myself. 2 weeks into the investigation, I stayed late reviewing files at the station. Around midnight, I walked outside for air. That's when I noticed something standing across the street, watching me. At first, I assumed it was a homeless man. Then the streetlight flickered, and I realized how big it was. At least 7 feet it had to be, maybe even taller. Its face was pale, wretched. I froze. The thing didn't move, and neither did I. Then, every streetlight along the block shut off simultaneously. Darkness swallowed the street. For maybe 3 seconds, I saw nothing. Those might have been the longest 3 seconds of my life, staring into a black abyss, waiting for something to appear. Then the lights returned. The figure was gone. I searched everywhere. Nothing. That should have been the moment I walked away. Instead, I became obsessed. I stopped sleeping, stopped going home regularly. Every lead circled back to Redstone. Old reports surfaced. Disappearances going back at least 50 years. Always near Halloween. Always involving groups. And occasionally, messages. A retired sheriff from the 70s agreed to meet me privately. The man looked terrified before I even sat down. "You need to leave it alone," he told me immediately. I asked why. He slid an old case file across the table. Inside were photographs, bedroom walls, with messages scratched into plaster. "He's always watching." My stomach dropped. "This happened before?" "3 times, he whispered. "Who's he?" The old sheriff stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something I still hear in my nightmares. "There's something in Redstone that likes to be noticed." I demanded real answers, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood to leave. Before walking away, he added, "And once it notices you back, it doesn't stop." 2 days later, the sheriff died. Heart attack, officially. But when officers found him, the walls of his bedroom had been destroyed, scratched apart, as if someone had clawed through the drywall with bare hands. That night I drove to Redstone alone. Huge mistake. Rain hammered the windshield as I parked near the old drainage tunnel. I carried a flashlight and revolver even though every instinct told me to turn around. The woods were silent. Not a normal silence. Dead silence. I couldn't hear insects or wind rustling through the trees. Nothing. I reached the tunnel entrance around 1 a.m. and immediately smelled something rotten drifting from inside. I went in anyway. The beam shook in my hand as I moved deeper. Then I saw them. Names. Hundreds of names carved into the tunnel walls. Some fresh, some ancient. Missing persons from decades of unsolved cases. Children, adults, entire families. Every name gouged into the stone. Then my flashlight landed on something worse. 9 fresh carvings. The missing teenagers. Right beneath them were new words. "They see him now." The breathing started again, closer this time. It was behind me. I turned slowly and saw it standing at the far end of the tunnel. Not a shadow this time, not just my imagination. It was real. It was really there. Its skin looked pale, white, and scratched all over. Its eyes were huge, black, unblinking. Its face was terrifying. That's the only way I can describe it. It ducked slightly to fit inside the tunnel ceiling, watching me, just watching. So I drew my revolver. Then, all at once, the tunnel filled with whispers, children crying, people begging, voices layered over each other until my ears rang. I fired twice. The shots echoed violently, but the creature didn't react. Instead, the whispers became laughter, and suddenly, it was closer to me. I don't remember running. I only remember crashing through the woods, unable to breathe, while something moved between the trees beside me, keeping pace, never attacking even though I knew it could. It just watched. By the time I reached my car, I was screaming in utter terror. I never returned to Redstone after that night. To this day, the case remains unsolved. The teenagers were declared legally dead in 2011. No remains were ever recovered, no suspect ever identified. But that's not the end, because 6 months after I retired, I woke around 2 a.m. to a scratching sound inside my house. At first, I thought it was mice. Then I heard it coming from upstairs, from my bedroom wall. I grabbed my pistol and climbed the stairs slowly. The scratching stopped before I reached the door. Inside, the room was empty, but above my bed, freshly carved into the wall, were the words, "He still watches." I sold the house the next week, moved 3 states away, didn't tell anyone where. It didn't matter. Last month, I woke to breathing outside my apartment window, 3rd floor. I didn't look. I couldn't. But when morning came, there were long scratches on the glass, and written across the inside of the fogged window were 4 words traced by something that had been standing there all night. I found you.